How's it going, everyone? Welcome, Oliver Gonzalez here. And today, let's going to explore now about the cascade, which is part of the way of the CSS now resolve how declarations, how competing declarations are resolved, right? Which is the cascade. And I want to bring your attention to this section, which is very important here, all right? Which is Amelia Vatten, I think I'm pronouncing that right? Vattenberger. Okay, so Amelia Vattenberger. I think I pronounced that right. So Amelia Vattenberger described that the CSS cascade, or the way how now the browsers resolve competing CSS style, is in this particular way. But again, the TLDR of this, or in this video, is for us to make a quick recap of this particular course. So we're going to dive deep later on, which is the cascade, all right? And also to the block and inline directions, the box model, and then we jump to the flow layout, right? So let's get into it. Now, I want to bring the attention to recognize what are the fundamentals from this particular course, which is taught by Josh Comeyo, a software engineer that previously worked at Khan Academy, as well as the Gatsby, all right? Where, well, he created now these two models. So the first is, there is no order here, but it has the CSS for JavaScript developers and the joy of React, which is walking step by step of what the React actually it is, right? So, because here with CSS for JavaScript developers, we first look at the model 0, or the fundamentals, and I'm just going to make a quick recap of that to understand how do we get here and why we're looking at this kind of stuff and how all of that relate each other. So in the model 0, we look at the anatomy of a CSS rule. Okay, so we first understand is what is the CSS, and then how you can now styles to your CSS, whether it's external, inline style, or external, internal, and inline style. Also, the way of how you can select elements so you can now apply this set of rules, such as for tag or class or attributes, or per state base, all right? And also for the combinators, all right? So how you can now combine multiple of tag to actually go down to a specific element that you want to. So this is the reason why we actually are looking at the cascade, because it's something that we're going to see in a moment. So we look at that, all right? What is CSS? How we can add? How can we add now styles to our documents? The selectors, as well as the combinators, and then the state-based selectors, and also is the function, which is another part of the anatomy of CSS. And all of this, you can find that in MDM docs, all right? I just didn't make this up. In functions, for example, like calc or color, like RGB, or for rotate, for translate as well. And the add rule that you are now telling how CSS should behave. And when that happens, you want to apply this set of rules. You want to now indicate is how your how the web content in your app is going to look and it's going to be displayed, the layout, right? And then so common add rules like the layer, all right? So we have now the layer, the keyframes, the font face, among others, all right? Media query is another one. And then from that, we also look at the shorthands property, which is quite important to know that some property actually you can shrink their values, and the comment. So with that huge intro, all right, with that recap, in the module 0 of this course, we went through look at the most common topic that we need to know that are still relevant despite that a lot of these things are now generated for us using JavaScript model tooling. Okay, so because of that, well, we look at the media, a specific add rule, and how important it is because it's actually involved in a lot of mobile first development. Okay, so we have the media, we also have now the select. The first thing first, to understand what is a rule, the anatomy of a rule. So what is a selector, what is a declaration, a value, a unit, you know, the media query, the selectors. So we have the pseudo-elements, we have the normal selectors, all right, whether it's ID, tag, class, attributes, and the especially nifty selectors that despite all of this are being solved for all of this more JavaScript tooling, it is still important to actually understand that, right? So for example, is the pseudo classes like hover and focus and check and first and last child and first end of type and last end of type, and especially with focus because this is something that the web content accessibility guidelines use that heavily to tell us, hey, we follow 4 principles here. So anytime that you want to make your web app accessible, all right, so people with no pointer like devices like mouse or touch pad can interact with your app, well, there is this particular principles and these guidelines. The principles is that is perceivable, that is operable, that is understandable, and is robust. Right, you can check that out on their website for any for more clarification on that. And okay. Yeah, for more clarifications on that, and all right, and well, we are now looking at the pseudo elements. All right, so these pseudo elements that allow us is to, for example, is like placeholders and before and after. Okay, so when we need to is add in some content, we use this before and after for any content decoration. The other pillar is to know about the combinators, as I mentioned before. So the combinators, the color, and So we have now right now 4 type of color formats, like the keywords, RGB, hexadecimals, and HSL. And why do we prefer to go with the HSL? Because it's actually something that we can now have an intuition of what would be the color look like by just looking at their values. Another important topic is the units. So the basic common units like m, root m, and percentage, and how now that actually impact the percentage on height calculation and aspect ratio. Again, something that we're gonna see later. The typography, all right, where pretty much like the color is now this huge universe. So we boil down to in font families, what are they, why we have now web fonts, what is a web font, what is the reason for them to exist, and then the type formatting, or the most common type formatting, like bold, italic, and underline, and which each one of them, or what does it mean, each one of them, and the text alignment, the text transformation, and the text spacing, right? So this is just the basic, all right? So with that basic, okay, when we now look at the CSS, all right, from that angle, and now in this model 1, we look now at the rendering logic. What is the series of steps that now CSS use as a way to determine what are the styles that we want us to apply to a specific elements? Because fundamentally, the CSS is tell us how can we control is the appearance and the layout of the web content in our app. So this is huge. And why we need to understand, for example, is that all browsers, they now have their own custom built-in style sheet known as the user agent style sheets. So we as developers, to get rid of this, or to strip out, to get rid of this, to strip away this incongruency among different browsers. Now the developers called Eric Mayer, actually back in 2007 and also in 2011, he created now this particularly rules to keep consistency, to make our document, to make the style sheets of our documents consistency across different browsers. All right. So the idea of this is that since this is something that, so it's already past 10 years from that. All right. And despite that browsers now faithfully follow the CSS spec, so there is not this massive incongruency among browsers, yet still is relevant for applying some modern CSS reset. Okay. Something that Joshua mentioned, that if you have an existing code base that do not apply any CSS resets style, because perhaps you as a developer, you don't get that, but as a user you will notice that. So if you go with that path, make sure to actually test everything, and if you are starting to increase the testing and all that kind of stuff, it also going to increase is the maintaining costs. So it is a trade-off, it is a trade-off. Now, We also look at the inheritance, okay, and how can we use now inheritance, because the people who wrote the CSS spec thought that that will be convenient to, for a specific set of properties, they can now inherit as the properties from parent elements, right? So a model from JavaScript, this is pretty much like the object, the prototype object, and how now you can think of that from JavaScript, all right? Where the idea of this prototype object is that it's going to look up that particular properly, and if that doesn't exist, it's going to use that it has by default, all right? Or the top of that. So again, this particular analogy of how inheritance work, and for example, we also look at a particular example with the anchor tag, how you can now actually force is inheritance in your applications. The other topic that is quite relevant and is also another universe in itself is the cascade, aka the way how browsers now resolve CSS, competitive CSS, resolve competing CSS. This is the reason why we actually hit the brake a little bit to at least understand that. And I know that, for example, if we are here, there you go. And I know that the rendering logic, the cascade here. Okay, so this is the cascade. But I think this come here. There you got it. In the cascade, all right. So the point of this is, despite that, despite that Josh says that based on his experience, okay, it doesn't, that he didn't dive deep too much into this because it's something that get pretty tricky pretty quickly. And since he worked on, all right, since he works, and this is a controversial opinion, but if you work with a component-based framework like React, you shouldn't ever have selectors like this, or this complexity of selectors. But again, let's go to understand what the cascade is, right? So cascade, in other words, is the way how browsers resolve competing CSS style, right? So consider the following bits. You get this? So consider the following bits. Okay, so consider the following bit of CSS and HTML. So we have created here two rules, the targeting P, and another is a class introduction. And I want to write down this. So we describe here two rules, all right? We describe here two rules. One is targeting P tags, and the other class dot introduction. Okay. one targeting p tags and the other introduction. I'll be right back. And we're back. So yeah, we switch way much better disposition now. So we were here at the cascade, right? And here we have we're describing is two rules. One targeting p tag, and the other is a dot introduction class. So what will be, and then we create the HTML element that match them both. So and then we create the HTML that match them both. All right. So what will be here? What will be the font width, and color of the p tag? All right. So you may already know what happened here. You may already know what happened. So what happened here? Okay. So yeah, you may already know what happened. What happened in here? What happens here? You may already know what happened. Why did you correct that? What happens here? Exactly. It blocks. Okay, it blocks. Meaning, but the French though is block, to remove or detach. Block a chicken. Oh, in Spanish, plug, como despellejar, desplumar, pelar, arrancar o sacar. Pluck. Okay, we pluck. He block impressive. Her block impressed everyone. O coraje, a lot of block. Interesting. Coraje, block. Her block impressed everyone. Her block. O sacar, arrancar, to tear out. Exactly, that's way interesting. Arrancar, pulsar, pelar, frutas, desplumar, pluck. Okay. Block. So we went up. What the French does? Went up. Okay, I went up. But I think this is quite interesting. You know, holy moly, win up, win something up. Win up, bro. Okay, win. Yeah, it means like win. I know what is this. Win up.
Wind.
Wind. Breath of wind. Gust of wind. We win up. Okay. We went up. All right. We went up. Okay, we went up. Give something to conclusion. We went up. Exactly. Like wind. In Praga. Interesting. Okay. In Praga. Okay. So we went up. Okay. We just went up. To finish, to complete. Yeah, I went up. I went up. But again, this is for British. Yeah, I went up. I went up. Interesting, okay. So here, we went up with a ball, okay? We went up with a ball, violet paragraph. Here, we went up, okay, here we went up. Here we finish, okay. Okay, British. Okay. Here we went up. So here we went up. Here we went up a ball, violet paragraph. We went up, bro. We went up, man. We went up. You know, I'm tripping here with these particular words. We went up, bro. Anyway. You may already know what happened here. We went up a bold, violet paragraph. Okay? It blocks the font width. So it blocks the font width. Okay? It blocks the font width declaration It blocks the font width declaration from the it blocks the font width declaration from it blocks the font width declaration it blocks the font width declaration, and I love the word that they're using here. Went up, we went up. Okay, went up. So we went up, or we finish. Okay, we finish. We finish with a bold violet paragraph, and it plucks the font weight declaration from the exactly. So it blocks the font weight declaration as it is. It blocks the font weight declaration. It blocks the font weight declaration from the p tag and the color from the introduction class. Okay, it blocks the font weight declaration, or it exactly, and the color declaration from the introduction class. This example shows the cascade algorithm. The cascade algorithm. Show the browser cascade algorithm. This example show the browser's cascade algorithm. Okay. At work. So this example show the browser cascade algorithm at work. That's interesting. And again, with this silly example, all right, which is a very silly example, all right, with these silly examples here, we describe is the browser cascade algorithm at work, but we're using is this particular words here. We went up with a bold violet hello world paragraph. Okay. So we describe here two rules. One, targeting p tags. Yes, I just want to understand these particular words, but we pluck the font weight declarations from the p tag and the color declaration from the introduction. This example illustrate now is the browser's cascade algorithm. There is some controversial here stuff. When the browser needs to display our introduction paragraphs on the screen, it first needs to figuring out which declarations apply to it. And before it can do that, it needs to collect a set of matching rules. Once it has a list of applicable rules, it works out any conflict. I imagine this as a sort of a death match. If multiple selectors each apply the same property, it pits them against each other. So if so, two fighters enters, but only once emerge. That's the main idea. The browser will take a set of applicable style rules. And whittle it. Whittle. What the French toast is this? Whittle it. To make something from a piece of wood by cutting off small things and whittle it. How do you pronounce that in Spanish? Whittle it. Tallar o hacer tallas. In some contexts, whittle can also mean a reduce or diminish something. And in Spanish it's often translated as reducir, recortar o mermar. Whittle it. Oh, okay, whittle it. Whittle it. Holy French toast, bro. Okay, whittle it. Okay, whittle it. Whittle it. Holy fuck. Okay, whittle it. Es como tallar, o es reducir, o es mermar. Mermar. Estoy mermando algo aquí. Está mermando algo. Reducir y recortar. Whittle it. And it whittle it down to a list of specific declarations that are applicable. How does it determine which rule win each battle? It depends on the specificity of the selector. The CSS language includes many different selectors, and each selector has a relative power. For example, classes are more specific than tags. So if there is a conflict between a class and a tag, the class wins. And ID, however, are more specific than class. And the similarity with JavaScript merging, like this. So you can think of this as the merge, right? Let me take a quick break here, and I'll be right back. All right, and we are back. All right. Now, so this is the cascade algorithm, right? So in other words, is a way how now the browsers resolve, or how the browsers resolve competing CSS style. All right. So I know that Josh Comewa is not a big fan of that, and he also is this. Okay. So how does it determine this? How does it determine which rule win each battle? So how does it determine which selector, okay, or which declaration, because it's that, which CSS declaration or rule wins? To save ourselves from future ends, let's take a step back and learn these things for real. Alright? Every time we write a CSS the CSS cascade is the way our browser resolves competent CSS declaration. All right. So how it determines which CSS declaration wins. Exactly. How does the browser determines how does the browser determine which CSS declaration win? All right. Through a specific way of doing this. Every time we write a CSS declaration or rule, it will enter the CSS cascade, which will determine whether or not it will end up in the final style. The further down of the cascade the further down the declarations, the further down the cascade a declaration falls, the less likely it will end up in the final style. Okay. So the further down the cascade a declaration falls, the less likely it will end up as the final style. The less, because it has different tiers. The further down the cascade declaration fall, okay. The further down the cascade, exactly. The further down the cascade, the cascade. The further down the cascade a declaration falls, the less likely is to be on this style or to be applied. Okay, the less likely it will end up in the final style. The less likely is it will end up in the final style. All right. Stop doing that, bitch. I don't know. So you get stuck with that. You get stuck with that. You know, you get stuck with that. Jesus. No. Enough of that. Oh my God, for real? Okay. All right. So the further down the cascade a declarations fall, the less likely it will end up in the final style. Okay. Let's take a look at the different tiers of the cascade. The different tiers of the cascades are the importance. Okay, so there are 4 basic type of rules. So importance, so the tier cascade tiers. You might not consider to add this cascade tiers, but I do. Perhaps you, based on your experience, that you don't have to do work with that. All right. but I think it is important, at least for us. Cascade tier, the importance. Okay? Based on the importance. The importance. So for example, transition, important, animation, and normal. Okay? So transition, important, animation, and normal all right. The origin, if the two rules are tied on one tier of the cascade, the fight goes down in another round. Okay. Look at the type of rule we're looking at. The type of rule. Or the type of rule. Alright, if you want to take a dive down deep into this, I will suggest to take a look at this. I'll suggest to take a look at this for further explanation, but here we're just going to look at the more relevant stuff here, you know, the more relevant stuff here. The second level is the origin. The second level is the origin. Alright? The second level is the origin. Looks at where the rule was defined. Where the rule was defined. Okay. So it can be on the website, at the user, or at the browser. Whereas website rule normally wins over a browser default. This is the only level that you have control over as a web developer. The website, the user, and the browser, or known as user agent. User agent style sheet. Then you have now the specificity. The third type of the cascade, look at the specificity of a rule. The specificity. Okay. Look at the specificity of a rule. The specificity. The specificity. The specificity of a rule the specificity of a rule, whether it's inline, now we got is the layer. So we got inline, the layer, the inline and the layer. Exactly, this is something new. Defining our layers here, layers 1 and 2, layers win by being defining later. For example, is this. In this example, our body text will be green since layer 2 is defined after layer 1. On layer style will take precedence through to the help with backward compatibility. And when we create a CSS declaration, we can target specific element using selectors. The other is via ID, class, attribute, ID, class, attribute, and pseudo-element, pseudoclass, and the other is tag and pseudo-element. Okay. And last but not least is the position or the location. The order that the rules were defined. The other is the position. The order in which the rule was defined. Okay. And that's it. So, yes, despite that this might not be quite important to know, all right, especially since we as JavaScript developers, the specificity, you can think of the similarity with CSS merging. Alright, the similarity with CSS merging here is through this. It turns out JavaScript has the perfect tool for the job, which is a spread syntax. In principle, the cascade algorithm works something like this. Okay. In our early example, we saw these CSS snippets, and we can think of this. This could be written like this. Relevance in modern application development. Exactly. And now we look at this, right? Relevance in modern application development. If you are going to develop, all right? So CSS specificity gets pretty quickly when you dive below the surface. For example, if both of the following selector match a button, which one has higher specificity? Let's take a look at this. So since this is a form, since this is an ID, all right. All right. This will win as long as it is targeting is a pseudo selector. So you can think of this as how many of them are actually how many of them are checks here. How many of them are check? How many of them are checks? How many of them are check? So because of his experience, all right? And if his experience is summarized in working at Khan Academy, right? He doesn't mention about his Gatsby and none of that kind of stuff, right? But his experience is about working at Khan Academy. Okay. The specificity or the relevance of the cascade, okay, which is a controversial opinion. This is a controversial opinion. If you're going to work, but if you are going to work with component-based applications, all right? If you're going to work with component-based applications like React, you shouldn't ever have selectors like this. So like React, you shouldn't have selectors like this. All right. Not only that this introduces complexity, not only so not only that this introduces confusion, okay, unnecessary confusion in your code base, okay, but there are the JavaScript motor tooling that handles this thing for us, such as CSS in JavaScript and CSS models, CSS in JavaScript, CSS models, something that we are going to look at that later, okay? But it's important at least to understand that what is the cascade, why cascade exists, what is the problem that it solves, what it does, and how it works. So the cascade, why it exists, because we can control is how our elements is going to look like in the design and the layout of this. So because of that, And since we want to now improve the developer experience by inherit properties and make it easy for us to pass down that to other class or reuse that, the cascade is now how the browsers solve competing CSS declarations. And why this exists is because this particular problem is because now you can have is CSS declarations that are competing to them. All right, so you have now is a property and a value that is competing with that, whether it is a typography settings or whether it's a typography settings or a layout or margins, color, you name it. So this CSS now solve the problems of how browsers resolve this competing CSS, and it has now, well, a particularly cascade method. The further your CSS declarations go into that or fell off, the less likely is to be appear on the screen. And for that we have is the first the importance, which is this first is the important, which is the type of rules that is affecting to, all right, for example, transitions, animations, important, that, so transition, important, animation, and all of the normal rules, all right. And if for some reason we're still not competing, let's take a look now at where the rule was defined in the past. Where the rule was defined, it was on the website, or it was the user, or it was the browser. Okay. Remember, the further these CSS declarations fell off or false, the less likely, the further these declarations false, the less likely is for that to be in the final style. So if you have now the important type of a rules, which is the type of rule, and what are the type of rules that now follow this cascade, is that first is the transition, then the importance, then the animation, and then any other normal rules. The other level, or the other tier in this cascade is how do you put it? The other tier in this cascade is where was defined, at the website, at the user, or at the browser. All right. And the other is now is the specificity. So the specificity of a rule, in other words, the selector of that. So you have now is the inline or layer, which is something new, all right? The inline or layer, the at layer, okay? The other is the ID, the class attribute or pseudoclass, and last but not least is the pseudo-element or a tag, all right? And then we have now is the location, at which position the rule was defined, or in the order of the rule was defined. And I think this particular way to describing this is quite accurate. It's pretty straightforward of that. Is this cascade tier? Is this cascade tier? Interesting. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense of this. It makes huge sense of this. It makes huge sense of this. And some of the similarity with JavaScript merging, especially when you can use the spread operator syntax. And well, some controversial opinion, because if you have now a declaration that is confusing, that you don't know which element you are selecting, that's an indicator that is problematic first, and the second, that you must define some things that are clear to read. Okay, so you have now particularly libraries that handles those selectors for you, which is something that we're going to see that later. But again, this is a controversial topic. In any case, I'll prefer to know the cascade mechanism. All right, and according to Amelia Wattenberger. All right, so Amelia Wattenberger. If we take a look at her, Amelia Wattenberger is her. Amelia Wattenberger is that. I think she is her. I think she is what the fuck, but she looks like Japanese. Yep, she looks like Japanese. What the French does. And then she have like a, yeah, like a German. Okay, cool. Cool. All right. Climbing the ladder of abstractions.
Yeah, me neither. But from what I gather, it was super frustrating.
I'm having some trouble with the
and
connection.
tedious, and it involved a lot of like writing letters and numbers, annotating in margins, performing calculations by hand. You can probably look at these pages and sense how 79 PhysiCalc totally changed the game. The innovation here wasn't performing the calculations automatically. We already had calculators and computers do that for the numbers.
Oh, so it's her.
So one of the things I'm most interested in is what are the best ways to combine our new AI superpowers with the interfaces that we use to these two distinct goals. And in contrast, augmentation. This contrast often ignores how related these two
AI engineering.
I want to start with a question. Does anybody remember? And then finally, we're focused on training. And maybe if that's a little bit far, all 50 listings within glue them together and make it easy to move between them. And I think this could completely change the way that we work.
That was a
with
year
information.
ago.
So this is one of the many great explorations we're doing at Adept to make all computer work easier. We're going to have a lot more to share in the near future. Stay tuned. And then to sum up, there's 3 things that I would love for you to take away from this talk. The first is augmenting tasks are going to look a lot like automating smaller, tedious parts. No one's thinking of spreadsheets as taking people's jobs, and digital spreadsheets is exactly the kind of innovation that I want to see in the next few years. Secondly, no one's thinking of spreadsheets as taking people's jobs, and digital spreadsheets is exactly the kind of innovation that I want to see in the next few years. Jobs and digital spreadsheets is exactly the kind of innovation that I want to see in the next few years. Secondly, we often think about information at different levels of abstraction, and let's make this easier by using AI to generate and act on these different levels. And then lastly, this is the kind of thinking we're doing at Adept. Feel free to follow us or follow along, check in, and we're at adept.ai. All right, thanks for listening.
Presented by Microsoft.
I'm Dr. Orion Taraban, and this
Who
is...
the fuck? Okay. From the team behind the AI Engineering Summit. Oh, in San Francisco. New York, San Francisco, and Paris. Oh, it already happened. Mm-hmm. 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 The browser is a default MCP server for the rest of the internet. Yep, absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. Absolutely, bro. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Allie Howe. I am a VCISO for Growth Cyber. All the way back there was a lawsuit the other day on May 20th, so very recently, where a radio host, traditionally we had DevSecOps where our scanning tools, security tools like our SAS, adversarial threats, and also AI safety concerns. Runtime security, because AI Red TV can be particularly time consuming. Big NPC running in Fortnite. It was a really interesting setup that I tried to imagine.
Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Engineers warfare. Cool. 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 So she attends to that, right? To that particular event. Oh, this is the star and all of that.
Lady.
So without further ado, every aspect of AI. We have you folks are building real things every day, and real people are using them, and that's incredibly inspiring. So you should feel good about that and give yourself.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in awe.
Developer relations.
Hello, everybody. There are so many of you. It is great to see you here today. Welcome to the 2025 AI Engineer. You originally helped us.
Our entire day is changing. The workflow is changing. The old world used to be us shepherding syntax, and in this new world, GitHub Copilot can now live in your code base. It operates in your branch, you can assign a task to it, and it can run tests until it's complete. That means we're going to spend more time on architectural decisions, more time orchestrating teams of agents. Maintenance is changing too. In the old world, maintenance would compete with features. Hated that world. And in this new world, maintenance would compete with features. Hated that world. And in this new world, what we're seeing is the opportunity to invent agents that can continuously improve your code base. And that's why we invented something called FOSSI. You can think about it as graph rag for your code base. It can reason over it, it can explain it, and it can continuously improve it and even fix some errors.
Okay, okay. This is mind blowing. Okay. Oh my god. Oh my god. Okay. 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 Hmm. 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 People from a lot of company here. The other is a go-to conference. Health insurance appeal with generated AI from lab to production. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Learn from thought leaders and innovators with top-rated videos released daily. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Switzerland. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's going back to basics. Mm-hmm. 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 Anyway, that was interesting. It was mind blowing as well. Mm-hmm. 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 BlackRock, Infant Van, Senior Director of Engineer. Holy fuck. Director of Engineer, Compute Platform. Senior Director of Engineer. So BlackRock hire you? Software Engineering Aladdin Trading Network. Mm-hmm. And Quantum Fellow. Mentors and advisors. Mentoring Plateau. Oh, okay, mentor of Plateau. Mm-hmm. data consulting services. Anyway. Okay. All right. So, okay. Holy. Okay. This was mind blowing here. It was very mind blowing, and let's move on. So, Amelia Wattenberger. Okay, cascade tier. So Amelia Wattenberger. Amelia Wattenberger, in his post, in his blog, so Amelia Wattenberger made a great article about it. And who the French though is Amelia Wattenberger? Well, she is research engineer at CTO Group on GitHub. So as you can imagine, there is a lot of things that you need to do. You know, there is a lot of things that you need to know if you want to reach in those positions. A lot of that. Amelia Wattenberger. Let's get into this. Okay, let's definitely move on. Anyway, well, here we are. So block and inline directions. The web was built by displaying interlinked documents, and a lot of CSS mechanism and terminology are inherited from the printing world. A lot of CSS mechanism and terminology has inherited from the printing world, and I'm going to do this. Hey, let's definitely do this. Let's make this out. Let's make this out, right? Block and inline directions. So block and inline directions. The web was built for displaying interlinked documents. A lot of CSS mechanism. Exactly. So the web was built for displaying interlinked document. The web was built to display interlinked documents. Okay? A lot of CSS mechanism and terminology. So a lot of CSS mechanism and terminology comes from the print industry. Okay? The print world, the print industry. Let's take a written sheet of a paper as an example. English is a left to right language, meaning that the words are placed side by side from left to right. Individual words are combined into blocks, like headings and paragraphs. Pages are constructed out of blocks, placed on top of the another. When a new paragraph is added to the page, it is inserted below from the previous block element. In other words, English documents have two directions. The page consisting of vertical oriented block and made up of horizontal oriented words. Okay. So, CSS build its sense of direction based on the system. It has a block direction. The vertical, and inline direction, the horizontal. The vertical and inline direction, which is the horizontal. Exactly, the block and inline direction, which is horizontal. Here's an easy way to remember the direction for horizontal language. Block direction is like Lego block. Okay, they stack together on top of the other. Inline direction is like people standing in line. They stand side by side, not one on top of the another. In this course, we're going to focus on horizontally written language. Vertically written language on the webs are rare. Even hand-based languages that are traditionally written vertically, like Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, are often written horizontally on the web. We'll also mainly focus on left to right language, like English. We'll pick up a few tidbits about right to left language, like Arabic, but for the most part, it is beyond the scope of this course. You can learn more about the different writing modes in a wonderful article by James Simmons. Jen Simmons. I think what this is 24 ways to impress your friend. Oh, it's a advent calendar for web geeks. For 24 days each December we publish a daily dose of web design here. History of CSS through 15 years of 20 ways. Okay. In 2019, I read 9 articles in the 15 years of 24 ways. And all but one of those articles has something to do with CSS. In this last year of the project, I thought it would be take a look back of this CSS. Faster development with CSS constant. Cleaner code with CSS3 selectors. 2012 giving content priority with CSS grid layout. 2015 grid flexbox box alignment or new system for layout. 2016 what's next for CSS grid layout. In 2017 Christmas gift for your future self, testing the web platform. 2018 researching a property in CSS specification. In 2019 is the director of Edge of My Seed account, a UK development consultancy and creating of small content management system, Purge. A W3C invited expert on the CSS. Smashing Magazine. She is the author of a number of books, including the new CSS layout for a book apart, and a Google developer expert for web technologies. That's interesting. When not writing about business and technology on her blog at rachel.com.uk or speaking at conference, you will usually find Rachel running up and down one of the giant hills in Bristol, or attempting to land a small airplane while training for her pilot license. Everyone is becoming a pilot, bro. Everybody's becoming a pilot, bro. Oh shit. There is a pattern there. There is a pattern there. There is a pattern there, bro. You know? There is a pattern. There is a pattern here. Oh my god. 24 ways to impress your friends. Okay. In 2016, brought to you by Purge, the easy way to publish fashion, all of the kind of stuff. Why learn about writing mode? Okay. Ham-based systems. Okay. As well as the layout. What the? Perhaps the Mongolian version of Wikipedia will be redone with this layout. Holy fuck. Mongolian based systems. Similar to hand. Mongolian-based system. What the fuck? They read the content like this? They read the content like this? You gotta be kidding me. Now you might be tempted to ignore all of this. Perhaps you don't expect to be typesetting Mongolian content anytime soon. But here's why this is important for everyone. The way Mongolian words define the resulting writing mode, and it means you cannot use vertical LR for typesetting. What the fuck? The content goes through this, and they read from this to that. Okay, holy shit. Oh my god. Winter hiking. You say H1, I want the writing mode to be vertically, the transform rotate 100 degree, and text align right here. You can say winter hiking, vertical, sideways and sideways. Or you can put it this way. Winter. My dog likes hiking in the snow. You can check all my writings demoed at here. Labs. Jason Simmons. Study of Flexbox. Other experiment with graphic design. Exactly. It's because all of these come from the print industry. Hexagon layout. Image Gallery Studio. Study of practicality. Grid layout example 1. Okay. Made a simple grid. Make a radio-based grid. Okay. Make a responsive grid. Make a responsive grid. Okay. Make a responsive grid. Out of flow, sparse versus dense. Out of flow versus sparse versus dense. Holy hell. So then it's going to figuring out where to put those elements. Holy hell. Okay. Again, this is experiments. Make a simple grid. Writing mode example, a study of the three properties, vertical versus sideways. And then you got is this, under constructions idea. And combine shapes and clip path. And combine shapes and clip path. A secret weapon to fight climate change data. That's interesting. The experimental layout lab. Conference talk. Model layout getting out of our route. An event apart.
stuck in a rut. It's a rut that's shaped like this. It doesn't seem to matter whether you are a prestigious international news organization, or a local newspaper, or a tabloid newspaper, or you're selling clothes, or running a church, or talking about sports, or broadcasting a podcast, or distributing films, or traveling the world, or teaching graphic design professionals. You're stuck in this rut. Or I know I am totally oversimplifying. Some of us are stuck in this rut. When did this become the thing that you are supposed to do in web design layout? I don't know. That pattern started originally when blogs were hot, and when we went from 640 pixels wide on the screen to 800 pixels.
Jen Simons. Exactly.
But we are always thinking about the users and what is it like for users, and are they going to be annoyed over and over again? Is the worst of the code that might get written going to hurt users in some way? And we're trying to find a balance.
Okay, Lord. There was a lot. I think this is the current one. I think this is the current one. Exactly. I think this is the current photo of her. Don't know. But at least the new ones, Jeff Simon. I don't know if she is still active there. It seems not that much. Yep, it seems not that much from the last year. From the last year, by the way. Exactly, from the last year. Oh my god. Oh, they migrate to. Oh, I get it. So they migrate to Bisq app, bro. Oh, okay. I get it, man. I totally get it, man. I totally get it. I totally get it, man. Okay. Holy moly. Yeah, my friend. Yeah. Okay. How hot hat them. Okay, so people. So they are moving is toward that social network stuff here. All right. That's mind blowing here. That's a mind blowing stuff here. So again, we want to be time effective of our content here, of what are we gonna look and read to, because there is a lot of things to learn, to grasp, and we want to be time effective and efficient with this, right? All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's take a look at the other one, the logical properties. Earlier we learned about the built-in style. These are rules that each browser comes with out of the box, defined in the user agent style sheet. Here are some built-in style for p tags in Chrome. They're gonna define as a block, margin block 1 element, margin block m, margin inline start with 0, margin inline n. You might not have seen my block margin block star before, but you can figuring out what it means. You say margin block star from context. You can figuring out why Chrome choose to use this property instead of the margin property. Margin block star and block n and inline star and inline n. Give it some thought and then click in the button to continue. Okay. Can you figuring out why Chrome choose to use this property instead of standard margin property? And the other question is that you may have not seen, but can you figuring out what it means from the context? That is going to say, hey, from the axis here, I want to now put the block star in 1M, all right? The same, okay, similar for the font size. So you say, hey, the way how this is going to be displayed, this element in the block in a vertical way, is with a separation of 1M in both ends, right? And I don't care about the inline star. They're gonna be together here. So these properties are equivalent to the cardinal direction of margin top, margin bottom, margin left, and margin right. Margin block refers to the vertical axis, and margin block star to refers the top, since the block elements are stacked on the bottom, and similarly, margin inline star refers to the horizontal directions here. Why use this alternative? Because not all languages are left to right, top to bottom. If you were to switch your browser's language to Arabic, margin inline star will add spacing to the right instead of the left. Since Arabic is right to left language, exactly. These alternatives are also known as logical properties. It is not just margin, they are logical variants for padding, bordering, and overflow as well. There are still few kinks around some of the shorthands variant, e.g. margin blocks instead of margin block star. But this property we have seen are supported in all major browsers. Let's take a look at the more logical properties and values here. Okay, they are calling for block and inline directions. Note that we're speaking purely in terms of directions at this point. It's no coincidence that the display property can be set to block and inline, but we are not actually talking about those values yet. For now, the important takeaway is that content is structured along a block axis and an inline axis, just like the real world document. When should you use logical properties? Logical properties are intended to entirely replace their conventional alternative in the future. We might all write margin inline star instead of margin of left. That said, it is hard to overcome inertia. I'll be honest, I'll still reach for margin left out of the habit. The main selling point for logical property is internationalization. Okay. Well, what is it? If you want your product to be available in the left to right like English language like English and right to left language like Arabic, you can save yourself a lot of trouble by using logical properties. The main arguments against using logical property is browser support. Now to be clear, browser support for logical property is very good. It's very good. At this time of writing, 98% of the device supports it, but there are some noticeable gaps, including Internet Explorer 10, 11, Opera Mini, and relatively decent versions of Safari. In this course, we primarily use conventional property like margin left, but if you start a new project, I'd encourage to give logical property a shot. That's interesting. Okay. So to recap this, okay. We look at the way of. Okay. I'm gonna make a case here, because all of this is just making a case. I think that the pattern here, the pattern to engage you in reading something or to listen something is that you're making a case, okay? And the case here that blog and inline direction is, well, all of this is, so the way how the way how the web was designed is to display interlink documents. So a lot of CSS mechanisms and terminology comes from the print industry. So because of that, now the way how do we read content in English, right, or in Spanish, or any of this, left to right, right? In your case, if you read me, it's from right to left, but from left to right, okay, using is the Latin, but let's go into, for simplicity, use the English or Spanish, French, German, all right? All of them are now using is this left to right, okay? So because of this, imagine that you're gonna read a paper, okay? Imagine that you're gonna read a paper. So in English, it's left to right the language, meaning that the words are placed side by side from left to right. Individual words are combined into blocks like headings and paragraph. Pages are constructed out of the block, placed one on top of the other. When a new paragraph is added, it is inserted below the previous element. So especially if you have this particular layout, all right, in the English, you have a paper that, remember that all of the mechanism and terminology come from the print media, the print industry, okay? So if you have now a paper, right, and the way you read that, whether it's in English or Spanish or French or German, okay, is from left to right, meaning that the words are placed side by side from left to right, and individual words are combined into block like headings or paragraph, okay, and page are constructed out of blocks placed on top of that. So when a new paragraph is added to the page, it is inserted below the previous block element, and so on and so forth. This consists is the direction. English documents have two directions. The page consists of vertically oriented blocks made up of horizontally oriented words. Exactly. The page consists of vertically oriented blocks made of horizontally oriented words. So this is the reason CSS built its sense of direction based on this system. And it has a block direction, the vertical or the main axis, all right, and the inline direction or the horizontal axis, right? Here's an easy way to remember the direction for horizontal language. But all of this is because of this. So the web was built to display interlinked documents, and a lot of CSS mechanism and terminology come from the print industry. So imagine, or in this case, let's take a look at an English document, right? Okay, perhaps it's quite big, but I think it fit to our purpose. Okay, in English, Spanish, French, German, Deutsch, all right. We read Portuguese. Sorry, I didn't include that. We read a text from left to right, all right? Exactly. Individual words are combined into blocks, like headings or paragraphs. So individual words are combined by individual words are combined into blocks like headers or paragraph. Okay, so pages are constructed out of blocks and placed on top of the other. When a new paragraph is added to the page, they say, so pages are constructed out of blocks, are constructed out of blocks, okay, placed on top of the another, or placed on top of the another. So when a new paragraph is added to the page, it is inserted below the previous block. Exactly. So a new paragraph is added, a new block is put at the bottom. Put at the bottom here. It's put at the bottom from the previous. Okay, from the previous block. So in other words, English documents. So in other words, these kinds of documents where you now read your language in left to right, which for us it seems like of course, since we read these docs from left to right, all right, and so words, so we read our text from left to right, and the combination of individual words makes blocks like a heading or a paragraph, and pages are made of these blocks that is putting one below after another, all right, one below, exactly one below after another, all right. So in other words, these kind of documents have two directions. It's interesting that it doesn't barely use numbers. It has two directions. The page consists of vertically oriented block. The page consists on vertically orientated blocks. Okay, vertically orientated blocks made up horizontally orientated words. Made up horizontally made up words. So you get it this. This is just to describe is based on this logic. It's inline and the other is block. Alright, inline and block. Alright, inline and block. So an easy way to remember them is by an easy way to remember there is like this. Blocks are like Lego. Okay. Block direction is like Lego block. So block direction is like Lego blocks. Stack on top of another. And the inline direction is like a queue. It's like people standing in a line. It's like people standing in a line. Alright? So they stand side by side, not on top of that another. Like in a queue. Right? So in this course, we're going to focus on horizontally reading language. In this course, we are going to focus on horizontally reading language. On horizontally reading languages. Okay? Vertical reading language on the webs are rare. Even hand-based language that are traditionally written vertically, like Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, are often written horizontally on the web. Vertically written language on the webs are rare. Vertically written language. Exactly. Vertically written language on the webs are rare. Even the hand-based languages like Chinese, Japanese, and Korean are often written horizontally. except for this, except for the Arabic, except for Arabic languages, which will cover a little bit because it goes beyond the scope of this course. Absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. Absolutely, bro. Logical properties. So you can learn more about these writing modes in this wonderful article by James Simmons. But then we look at the logical properties. And why are we looking logical properties? Logical properties. Early we learned about built-in style. Okay. These are the rules that each browsers come with out of the box. Alright. So early we learned about built-in styles. Alright. These are the rules that each browser comes with out of the box. So these are the rules that browsers comes out of the box. Alright. Define in the user agent style sheet. Okay. So here is the built-in style for p tags in Chrome. Like this. You may have not seen margin block star, which is in my case. You may not seen margin block star before, but you can figuring out what it means from the context. But you can figure it out what it means from the context. Okay, can you figuring out why Chrome choose to use this property? Can you figure it out why Chrome choose to use this properties? And the answer relies on this internationalization, which is one of the behaviors on the string in JavaScript that allow us to deal is, for example, or to answer the question of how can we now compare or sort words in the same alphabet, in that same letter. All right. Or we can now get a segment or the meaningful word from that, for example, from Arabic language. So these alternatives are known as logical properties. These alternatives are known as the logical properties. So I want to bring your attention to this, okay, using a strong and a bold. All right. It is not just margin. There are logical variants for padding, border, and overflow as well. There are logical properties for margin padding, and overflow. Margin padding, border, and overflow. Border and overflow as well. Know that we're speaking purely in terms of directions at this point. It is not conscious that the display properly can be set to block an inline, but we are not actually talking about these values yet. For now, the important takeaway is that content is structuring along the block axis and the inline axis, just like in a real comment. So we are just talking about display, because we're just talking about display property. We're just talking about display property. It can be set to block an inline. So we're talking about is direction, okay, or the directions. We're talking about directions at this point, okay? Where we have is the main axis or the block axis and the inline axis. The block axis and the inline axis. All right? Just like a real Word document. Just like a real Word document. Okay, that's interesting. It's like a real world document. When should we use logical patterns? Okay. When should we use logical properties? When should we use logical properties? Okay. Logical properties are intended to entirely replace this conventional alternative. In the future, we might all write margin-inline-start instead of margin-left. Logical properties are intended to entirely replace their conventional alternative. So logical properties are an attempt to replace margin, an entire replace their conventional alternative. Their conventional alternative makes a lot of sense, bro. In the future, we might all write margin-inline-start instead of margin-left. So in the future, we might all write margin-inline-start, okay, instead of margin left. Interesting. Okay. Why is this? Okay, the main selling point for logical properties is internationalization. The main selling point of this is internationalization. 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 But internationalization. Okay, exactly. Is internationalization. Exactly. It's internationalization. All right. Nationalization. Or this one. Okay. Which is this. The main selling point of this is internationalization, bro. If you want your product to be available in the left to right language like English and right to left like Arabic, you can save yourself a lot of trouble by using logical properties. Exactly. Making your content available making your content available for language left to right and right to left like Arabic, like Arabics. So the main argument against using logical property is a browser support. Now, to be clear, browser support for logical property is very good. So the main argument to not use it is because it is poor support. However, however 96% Since 2021, this feature works across the latest device in major browsers. Here, learn about baseline. Very, very interesting. Okay. Recently, their support is very good. A 96% of the device, a 96% of browsers. 98% of device supports them, but there's some noticeable gaps, including the internet and Open Safari. Kali OS and Android. Opera Mini. Opera Mini and Internet 11. So only Opera Mini and Internet Explorer 11 are not supported. Okay, that's quite mind-blowing, bro. That's quite mind-blowing. But the idea here is to make yourself familiar with this particular topic, bro. So for that, that'll be all for this video. Take care. Bye-bye.